Snagging a Rolex or any other high-end watch is no small feat. It can feel like a marathon that stretches on for months, sometimes even years. But all that effort and wait time can come crashing down if you make a few simple missteps. That's why today we're diving into the things you probably do unconsciously and how to keep your precious timepiece safe and sound. We're talking about winding it the right way, being super careful when you handle it, and a bunch more tips that are all about keeping your watch in tip-top shape for as long as possible. So let's get into it and make sure your watch stays as valuable and pristine as the day you got it. Number 1. Wearing your watch on the dominant hand. We always recommend strapping your watch onto your non-dominant hand, and here's the scoop on why. Let's say you're a righty. Your right hand is always on a mission, busily jotting down notes, fetching items, and carting things around. It's practically a world traveler, constantly bumping into things and brushing past obstacles without a second thought. So it's way more at risk of scratching up your watch, or worse, damaging it. By rocking your watch on the hand you use less, you're giving it a bit of a safety shield. That less busy hand is way less likely to run into trouble, meaning your watch stays in top-notch shape for longer. And believe me, you're going to be pretty happy about making that choice. Number 2, not servicing every 4 to 5 years. A lot of us wonder how often we should get our watches serviced. Well, the sweet spot is usually every 4 to 5 years. Think of it as a tune-up for your watch, kind of like what you'd do for your car. This involves lubing it up, checking out the movements, and ensuring everything's ticking along just right. Now, we've heard of folks who go 10 to 20 years without a service, and their watches are still ticking. But really, sticking to that 4 to 5 year mark is a solid bet. It's one of those things where you can use your judgment, but regularly getting your watch serviced is a smart move to keep it running smoothly and looking sharp. But before we continue on our next tip, why don't you consider subscribing to Opulent Oasis? Here, we always equip you with some insider information that can help you get ahead. And let's get back into it. Number 3, not trying the watch on your wrist first. Everyone's got their own unique wrist size, right? So, when we're out there looking for the perfect watch, how it sits on our wrist is super important. But here's a little insider tip. Even watches with the same millimeter size can look and feel pretty different on your wrist. Take a 40mm Panerai and a 40mm Submariner, for example. Thanks to its design quirks, such as the bezel and crown, that Panerai might come across as a tad daintier compared to the Submariner. Now let's chat about Hublot for a sec. A 41mm might seem on the smaller side, something you typically see labeled for women, while the men's watches often start at 44mm. But then throw a Yachtmaster 2 on your wrist, also at 44mm, and it might feel larger due to the strap or bracelet design. So, what's the game plan? Start by picking a brand you're into, and try on a few different sizes. Get a feel for how a 40mm or whichever size catches your eye looks on you. Once you've nailed down a size that feels good in a specific brand, you'll have a pretty good ballpark idea of what to expect from other watches in that size range. It's always a smart move to try them on whenever you can, just to make sure. Number 4, polishing your watch. Let's talk about giving your watch a polish. Unless you've got the skills of a seasoned watchmaker or polisher, it's probably best to steer clear of DIY polishing. When it comes to polishing, brands like Rolex, AP, and Cartier aren't just following any old standards. They've got their own fancy, bespoke ones. If someone who isn't in the know tries their hand at polishing, they could end up doing more harm than good. It's way too easy to overdo it, rounding off those sharp edges a bit too much or shaving off more material than intended, which is a surefire way to knock down the watch's value. Take AP watches, for instance. Those screws on the bezel, super important. If a watch gets over-polished, those screws might end up sticking out like sore thumbs, too close to the surface, and that's not a good look. When it comes time to sell, dealers can spot an over-polished watch from a mile away, and they'll likely offer you less cash for it, since it affects both the appearance and the value. If you're dealing with minor scratches, a gentle polish with a cloth might not be the worst idea, but keep it light and don't make it a regular thing, and be super careful. For anything more major, Let's leave it to the professionals. They know exactly when and how to polish to keep your watch looking its best without crossing into the over-polished danger zone. So maybe consider polishing only every few years or so, when those little wear and tear signs start to catch your eye a bit too much. Number 5. On the right fit. You know how some folks love their watches hanging loose? We're not big fans of that. A watch that's too loose is just asking for trouble. It's more likely to get banged up because it's swinging around and might not even look that great sitting on your wrist. Our 2 cents? Go for a snug fit. Not too tight, of course. You'll want a bit of wiggle room for those days when your wrist decides to swell up a bit, maybe after a salty meal or during hot weather. But aiming for that sweet spot where your watch feels secure and comfy means you won't have to stress about it getting dinged or scratched. Number 6. Box and papers matter. Now onto the topic of original box and papers. They're pretty important when you're eyeing a new watch. Sure, it's not the end of the world if they're missing, but hear us out. If you're buying from a place you trust and there's no box or papers, it's totally fair to haggle the price down a bit, especially with high-end pieces. Think Rolex GMT or the Hulk. Those papers can bump up the value by a cool $1,000 to $2,000. So, if a watch you've got your eye on is listed at $17,000 but is missing those essentials, try to knock $2,000 off the price. On the flip side, if it's all there, be prepared to pay a premium. And when the time comes to sell, having them can make a big difference in your watch's resale value. So once you've got your hands on them, find a safe spot for the box and papers. A safe or a secure file works wonders. Losing them could dip your watch's value when you decide to part ways with it, so keep them tucked away safely and remember where that safe spot is. Number 7. Going for the wrong seller. When we're in the market for a new watch, doing our homework is key. It's all about finding that seller we can trust, someone with a solid reputation. Selecting a seller willy-nilly and crossing your fingers for luck is like taking the express lane to potential scam city. Stick with companies or sellers known for their integrity and track record. They're the ones who'll make sure the watch is in tip-top shape, checking out the movements and confirming that everything's genuine, with no aftermarket parts thrown into the mix. If something's up with the watch, they'll be upfront about it. We've seen too many horror stories of folks shelling out big bucks, only to end up with something far from what they expected. In a world where some will do anything for a quick buck, buying from a trusted source gives us that peace of mind. If anything does go sideways, it's comforting to know they've got our backs. Number 8. Not eyeing the condition. And when it comes to picking out a watch, especially those hot-ticket items like Submariners, Batmans or Pepsis, paying close attention to the condition is crucial. One thing we always keep an eye on is the insert, often made of ceramic. These fellows have a knack for chipping or cracking, and let me tell you, fixing them is a royal pain in the neck. Most of the time, only Rolex can take on that kind of repair job, since repair centers usually don't have extra bezels just lying around. If we end up sending a watch to Rolex, they'll probably want to give it the full treatment, polishing, fixing up any issues, the whole 9 yards. So if you're eyeing a watch that's priced way lower because of a damaged bezel or dial, remember, the fix isn't going to be cheap or quick. We're talking a good 3 to 5 months of waiting and a hefty repair bill. Number 9. Not taking it easy with the winding. One crucial bit we've got to remember is not to get too zealous when winding our watches. It's a common slip-up, winding the watch way too much, which can end up causing some real damage. When we start winding right after the crown pops out into that first position, that's our cue. About 30 to 40 turns should do the trick. The moment we feel the crown getting tougher to turn and it doesn't want to budge, that's our sign to stop right there. Pushing it further could mess up the winding mechanism and mangle the movement, leaving us with a hefty repair bill. If we ever go overboard and overwind by mistake, no need to hit the panic button. It's something that can be fixed, but honestly, it's a headache we'd all prefer to avoid, so let's keep an eye on not winding it too much. Number 10. Not being careful how we set it down. Now, when we're slipping on a watch or taking it off, how we handle it really matters. Laying it flat or on its crown isn't the way to go. Plopping it down flat risks scratching up the back casing, which can make our watch look older than it is, not to mention the potential damage over time. So, let's make it a habit to gently lay our watch on its side instead. This move is a simple trick to dodge those scratches and keep our watch looking sharp. And let's not forget about the crown. Resting the watch on it is a no-go, since it could harm the crown and even lead to our watch taking an unexpected tumble. When picking a spot to lay our watch, something soft and smooth, a cloth or a cushy countertop, would be ideal. So taking good care of our watch is key to keeping it in prime condition and preserving its value over the years. Got any more tips to share? Drop them in the comments below, and for more watch wisdom, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Opulent Oasis. Appreciate you tuning in.